Fantastic Four number 4, I now know the meaning of the word pareidolia. Pareidolia? Pareidolia? Look, I said I know the meaning of the word, not that I can say it. So in this issue, the Reed/Storm/Grimm extended family gets a new pet. Except the pet is not what it seems, and only Alicia Masters Grimm can tell the difference. And I guess the reason why everybody's fooled by this creature is because of pareidolia, if that's how you pronounce it. Apparently that's the human tendency to project familiar patterns and meanings onto things and situations where they don't otherwise exist. Like, for instance, from a textbook standpoint, this is not a smiley face. It's a series of lines arranged in a pattern that we project a human face onto. See, this is one of the reasons why I've really enjoyed Ryan North's run on Fantastic Four, this blending of comic book science with real-life science. It's really cool. I also like that we have Alicia teamed up with Reed Richards again in this issue. I love their, friend/in-law chemistry together. It's refreshing. The artistic vibe that our penciler Humberto Ramos and the rest of the artistic team bring to this issue is really great too. It really fits the sort of lighter tone that they're going for. And we may want to savor that light tone, because based on what just happened in One World Under Doom number 8, it may not last much longer. Kelleran Beck makes his Star Wars comic book debut, at least I'm pretty sure he does, in issue 8 of Star Wars Jedi Knights. Who the heck is Kelleran Beck? If you don't know, I'll tell you in a minute. So this is a standalone issue about a Jedi youngling, barely older than a toddler, I think, who mere hours after leaving her home to train with the Jedi, does something miraculous. But yeah, Kelleran Beck appears in the later part of this story. He's a character that was created for a Season 3 episode of The Mandalorian, and is played by Ahmed Best, the actor who lent his voice and his body movements via motion capture to Jar Jar Binks in the prequel trilogy. And the reason that's interesting is because, with few exceptions, you rarely see characters that were created on The Mandalorian used in, Star Wars comics and Star Wars books and stuff. Usually Jon Favreau likes to keep those characters in his own sandbox, at least for the time being. I can kind of see how they were able to use the Kelleran Beck character here, though. He does Jedi stuff, but there's nothing that we find out about him from a character standpoint. No new ground is paved, let's say that. Still, it is cool to see him, though. Ahmed Best did get to play a cool Star Wars character eventually. It just took an extra 20-some years for him to get there. Has Ahmed Best written a book, by the way? If he hasn't, he should. I would read it. I confess I'm actually kind of burying the lead here with this Kelleran Beck stuff, because this is actually one of the better standalone single issues of a Star Wars comic that I've read in quite a while. That's especially true early in the issue as you get into the heart-wrenching, life-changing decision that this little girl, this child, has to make for herself, and the body language that Maribek Musabekov, our artist here, draws on pages like this is really powerful, really strong. Much of the issue is actually drawn from her eyeline, from her perspective, which is something you don't necessarily see a lot on a Star Wars comic book. So yeah, the Kelleran Beck stuff made for a nice hook to get me to pick the issue up, but as far as once we got into the nitty-gritty of the book, the creative team here really knocked it out of the park, so my hat's off to them. Yeah, this is more like it. This is the Rocketfellers, number 10. So we're back in the present day here after a 3-issue story arc where we kind of backtracked and, filled in some backstory. Raina Rockefeller has now found the rest of her family hiding out in the present day. So she goes after them and tensions mount. This is also a Halloween issue, as you might be able to tell. It's Halloween when Raina discovers where they are, when they are, and the creators have some fun with that, not the least of which being this cover, which I really enjoy. You've got the Rocketfellers dressed up like other Ghost Machine characters. That's a lot of fun. But then because it's Halloween, Raina can wander around freely in her future-y outfit. The Rockefeller kids can go trick-or-treating in their time travel outfits. It's that kind of logic. See, that's the kind of quirky, comedic, sitcom-y logic that I've been missing from this book these last few issues. It's the same kind of logic that allows the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to wander around freely at like a costume party or whatever. But once the action kind of takes off in this issue, it's really strong. We've got like an initial explosive moment, followed by a chase scene. It's really great stuff. But yeah, the Rocketfellers was in a lull for a few months there, as far as I'm concerned at least. But with issue 10, it all comes rushing back from a quality standpoint. This issue was really exactly what I wanted it to be. I don't think I could have asked for anything more. And for the first time in a while, I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes next. Happy Halloween, everybody! Yeah, I'm in a different place for the moment. My basement is being worked on. Shout out to the Kenosha Public Library for hosting me. But it actually is a happy Halloween. For me at least, because today is the last time that I will have to talk about Batman The Last Halloween. Issue 10 of which, the final issue, just came out. As I've mentioned previously, the story here is kind of a wash, but there's a big battle scene here, and we find out who the mystery shooter is that's been targeting supervillains across Gotham City. But yeah, the reason I don't like talking about this book particularly, at least in this context, is because it makes me say not nice things about a work written by Jeff Loeb, who is one of my favorite comic book writers of all time. I owe a lot of my comic book fandom to him. But I value honesty here more than most things, and the honest truth, at least from my vantage point, is that this just didn't work. This story did not work for a variety of reasons, and I'll tell you some of them now. Doing another long Halloween sequel in general was a bad idea. We didn't really need any long Halloween stories after the first one. The first one was almost perfect just the way it was. Doing another long Halloween story without the late Tim Sale didn't work. Tim Sale was the artist for, of course, all the previous long Halloween stories, and his art really created the mood and the vibe that helped the stories work in general. He's irreplaceable. Bringing in a revolving door of artists with a new one each issue was a nice idea sentimentally, but it hurt the story's flow. The various styles all clashed. It hurt the book. Recycling the mystery gunman story didn't work. He was shooting these supervillains, but he wasn't killing them, and that took a lot of the bite out of the story. There were a lot of little things in this story that kind of worked, and that sort of adds up. It feels like The Last Halloween had a collection of small ideas in it that Jeff Loeb thought, oh, okay, I can use these in another long Halloween story, but we needed a big idea, like a big inciting incident, a big plot to justify coming back again. We didn't have that. As far as this issue in particular is concerned, Matteo Scalera is our final guest artist, and he does well, not surprisingly. There is, however, a horribly clunky revelation about Gilda Dent in this issue. I suspect If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about, and if you haven't read it, you'll know it when you see it. Too little, too late. That's really the bottom line on this issue. Kind of a clumsy wrap-up to kind of a clumsy story at the end of the day. Sorry, Mr. Loeb. The Superman Red and Blue 2025 special is one of the best Superman comics of 2025. So what we have here is an oversized anthology-type issue by various creators. The red and blue gimmick means that the only colors there are red and blue. But yeah, this issue really went above and beyond anything I was expecting. And that's not to say I had low expectations for it, it's just it really hits a home run. There's a lot of great creators associated with this issue. Paul Dini has a story in here. Rainbow Roll has a story. Cyan Tormey does some art. Chris Samney does the cover. But there are two stories in here that really stood out. And those are the two stories that I'm really gonna, I think, remember this issue for. The first is by Michael Walsh, who acts as a one-man show. He does the writing, all the illustrations, and the lettering. Basically, it's about Superman's relationship with time. Not in like a time travel-y Doctor Who kind of sense, but, you know, just trying to squeeze as much as he can into a given day. And I like that idea because it's something that I think the average person can certainly relate to. And then the other one is written by Dan Abnett and drawn by Caitlin Yarsky. Superman being interviewed by a small town journalist in Alaska really plays up Superman's everyman appeal, like his regular guy appeal. You know, it's easy to just say that Superman is like any ordinary guy who has good intentions, but this story does a great job of illustrating that, at least from Superman's point of view. And that's another plus for this book. All of these stories are pretty much Superman-centric, meaning they're not about like Superman-adjacent characters, they're just about Superman himself. I appreciated that. But yeah, I would definitely hand this to somebody who's curious about Superman comics in the aftermath of seeing the movie this year. And by the way, I did happen to be listening to certain songs from the Superman movie soundtrack as I was reading this. I guess I didn't mean to, but it definitely added to the experience. I recommend it.